Hi, welcome everyone to Unity Clear Lake Center in Lower Lake. Please mute your sound as Bill sings an opening joy song.
Tempted and tried, we're oft made to wonder why it should be thus all the day long, while there are others living about us, never molested or in the wrong. Farther along, know all about it. Farther along, we'll understand why. Cheer up, my brother, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. When death has come and taken our loved ones, it leaves our home so lonely and drear. Then do we wonder why others prosper, living so wicked year after year? Farther along, we'll know all about it. Farther along, we'll understand why. Cheer up, my brother, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. Faithful till death, saith our loving Master, though it is our time to labor and wait, then will our toiling seem to be nothing when we shall pass the heavenly gate. Farther along, we'll know all about it. Farther along, we'll understand why. Cheer up, my brother, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. We'll understand it all by and by.
Oh, beautiful, Bill, beautiful. I remembered to mute my sound so that I could hum along.
You did.
I did it. So here we are. We're so lucky to have Reverend Bob Brach with us. He's zooming all the way from Sacramento, and he is going to give us an opening prayer. Um, okay, Bob, thank you.
Thank you, Barbara, and thanks for that beautiful song, Bill. Wow. Well, the words that came to my mind as I was asked to do this opening prayer is, "This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. That's both from scripture and from song. So let's take those words into our heart and let us rejoice. Be joyful that we are here connected on our internet, heart to heart. And those people watching later by Facebook, we know that we're connected there too. And be glad. Feel that gladness, that thing of gratitude. Whatever we've got in our life, there is always something to be grateful for. And then rejoice. Be joyful. Have a wonderful, joyful day today. And that's a wonderful prayer to keep in our mind as we move today. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And so it is.
And so it is. Thank you, Bob. Bill is going to sing Surely the Presence and the Lord's Prayer.
Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. I can feel His mighty power and His grace. I can hear the brush of angels' wings I see glory on each face. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. Surely the presence of the light is in this place. I can feel her mighty power and her grace. I can hear the brush of angels' wings. I see glory on each face. Surely the presence of the light is in this place. And the Lord's Prayer. Our Father and Mother, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debt as we forgive our debtors. And leave us not in temptation, but deliver us from error. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Oh, amen.
Bill, always rejoice in your beautiful music and beautiful voice. Wonderful. Thank you. And now, as we continue, I'm going to read the invocation affirmation, and this is who we are. There is only one presence and one power active in my life, God the good, omnipotent. Then there is only one presence and one power active in Unity Clear Lake Center, God the good, omnipotent. And finally, there is only one presence and one power active in our world, God the good, omnipotent. And then we get to the basic foundation of unity found in the 5 basic ideas. Number 1, God is absolute good, everywhere present. Number 2, human beings have a spark of divine spirit within them, the Christ consciousness within. Therefore, they are inherently good. Human beings create their experience by the activity of their thinking. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. Prayer is the process that affirms our connection with God mind and brings forth wisdom, healing, and everything good. And finally, knowing and understanding universal laws, also called truth, are not enough. The person must also live the truth that he or she knows. And now we continue with Bill Barrows and his fabulous song choice.
Campfire, coffee from a tin cup in my hand sure warms the fingers when it's cold. Playing that old guitar, a friend I understand, sure smooths the wrinkles in my soul. blanket for the bed leaves a peaceful feeling in my mind. Waking up in the morning with an eagle overhead makes me long to fly away before my time. I think God must be a cowboy at heart, 'cause he made wide open spaces from the start. He made grass and trees and mountains and a horse to be a friend, and trails to lead old cowboys home again. The nightlife in big cities is alright for a while, sure makes you feel good when you're there. But the country is so pretty, it goes on and on for miles, and it takes away my troubles and my care. I think God must be a cowboy at heart, 'cause he made wide open spaces from the start. He made grass and trees and mountains and a horse to be a friend, and trails to lead old cowboys home again, and trails to lead old cowboys home again. It's written by a man named Dan Seals.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that twang in your voice. Woo. Hey, Bill, you were terrific. Oh, my goodness. Well, I see we have a lot of people. Okay, daily word. This is how I start my day. And here we go. For Sunday, February 23rd, wisdom guides my words and actions. When I have felt torn trying to decide which way to go or how to handle a trying situation, I may have asked in prayer for insight and guidance. As I have grown spiritually, I have come to realize that any insight and guidance I could need are within me, aspects of my divine inheritance. Divine wisdom is my ability to intuit, to sense, and to discern the best choice. I pay attention to my hunches, flashes of inspiration, and the whispers of guidance that I feel in my quiet moments. I believe they are divinely inspired, even if they surprise me. In confidence and with gratitude, I move in the direction of my highest good, trusting in my innate wisdom. Wisdom guides my words and actions. And from Isaiah 30:21, and when you turn to the right or when you turn to the left, your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, "This is my way, the way. Walk in it." Well, but for me, this year seems to be going by very fast. I don't know about you, but wow. And Reverend Bob Brach uses the word rocketing. Hmm, I agree with you, Bob. It's been rocketing by. So, Reverend Bob is going to give us some ideas on how to use faith, not fear, as we move forward. Okay, Reverend, it's your
Thank
turn.
you, Barbara and Bill. Thanks for that wonderful song. That's, that one line that a horse to be his friend, a horse to be his friend. And Margie and I had a 5-acre horse ranch in Modesto before I went to ministerial school. And at one time I had up to 11 horses on it. And boy, I'd come home from work. I was working in Alameda, I'd drive home, and about 2 hours later, I'm on my horse in my backyard riding. And I think Mark Twain had a saying, the best thing for the inside of a man is the outside of a horse. And wow, just going on. But well, the title of my talk is Faith of the New Year, Faith of the New Year. And like, wow, I think the little intro I gave Barb, the holidays are done and we're rocketing forward into a new year. Man, it seems it was just Christmas a week ago, just a week ago. Now here we're at almost the end of February, rocketing forward. Today we're going to revisit that power of faith that Mr. Fillmore talks about in his book, The 12 Powers of Man, and reinstill that faith in our lives. And the Irish folks have a saying: fear knocked on the door, faith answered, there is no one there. Fear knocked on the door, faith answered, there is no one there. Wow. Wow. This morning, Margie and I are having our breakfast, and we believe in supporting print media. So we subscribe to the paper for the New York Times and the Sacramento Bee. So we have a pile of papers on there, and the New York Times lasts all week as we go through it. But one of the things they told us in ministerial school is, on Sunday morning, take a look at the headlines and see what's up there. So so Margie and I both looked at them and went, just we got into what we call sometimes the oh my section. We read that article and we go, oh my. Like the statement of faith that Barbara read, there's one presence, one power, God the good, active in my life and in the universe. Sometimes we read those headlines and we go, where is God in that? Well, in unity, we talk about these various principles. There's one presence, one power, God the good, everywhere present. Eric Butterworth, a minister from New York, said there is not one spot where God is not. So God is in the act of all these things happening around our world and in our country and in our lives. So what about this faculty called faith? Charles Fillmore, a co-founder, defined it as the perceiving power of mind linked with the power to shape substance. The perceiving power of mind linked with the power to shape substances. Now, I teach the Bible classes for the Unity Urban Ministerial School. And sometimes we're talking about these 12 powers. And I always ask my students, what 2 powers was Charles talking about? Well, the perceiving power of mind is probably the power of imagination. But that power to shape substances, well, it could be wisdom, it could be understanding, which is the word for today, wisdom, shaping that and putting it into action. And my good friend, Reverend Phil Pearson, Phil and Dorothy Pearson were mainstays of the Unity movement for years. And I'm still in contact with Reverend Phil every week. And he pointed out that these 12 powers are always working, some more than others, and some are linked together. And he, in fact, has written a book on that, with these powers, the duads, he called them, linking together. Also, we have a book in Unity which can help us understand some of these things. And I have to dig it out under here. I put it over, but I had to put all my tissues on top of it. But we have some interesting study tools if we want to dig into them. And one of them is called the Revealing Word, definition of metaphysical terms. And metaphysical means looking beyond the physical. And in Unity, we like to take these stories in the Bible, for one, but we also take movies or whatever and look at what the deeper meaning is that to our own consciousness. Not our neighborhood, not the things going on in life, but our own consciousness. Because each person, place, thing, or event represents something in our consciousness. In the Revealing Word, his definition of the smaller words: sheep, goat, walls, temple, and so forth like that. And it also defines faith as well as hope. It puts it together. And the Revealing Word says this: hope is the expectation of good in the future. It's a quality, good as far as it goes, of sense mind, because it is subject to time. Faith is a certain knowledge that our good is here, is ours right now. Faith is a certain knowledge that our good is here right now. It is of God and goes beyond time and space. Faith and hope. I remember when I was back at ministerial school, and I also worked at Silent Unity as a Silent Unity prayer associates. And it's interesting, they told us, you will get the prayers that you need in your life. And sure enough, stuff that was going on in Bobby's life, people would call in for help about that. And I had to pray about it. And I went, oh my God, I got to listen to my own prayer. And I remember I used to like to listen to people being connected around the world, because in the center of the prayer room, there's this huge globe. And I'm thinking, man, people from all over the world are connecting. I remember one time I got this call and this woman said she's in Portugal. I said, you mean like Portugal, Florida? She says, no, Portugal, Portugal. So here I am sitting in Lee Summit and she's in Portugal, Portugal, connecting, and we're praying together. And sometimes after I did this beautiful prayer, people would say, oh, that was a beautiful prayer. I sure hope so. This is after we've gone through affirming that it's going to come about. You know, we get into our faith and all of a sudden we jump back to hope. So I hope so. And then I say, all right, well, whatever, you know, we have opened our minds to spirit, and spirit will move forward on that. When I was in ministerial school also, Reverend Paul Hasselbeck was in charge of the SEE, Spiritual Education Enrichment classes. And he was also charged with rewriting the Metaphysics 2 book, a handbook. And to help redo and the proof it, he asked some of us ministerial students if we would take a section and go through and proofread it. And if there's any corrections that need to be made, we could do it. So I forget which section I had. I probably could look. I've got it over my pile of books here. But the Metaphysics 2 book defines faith as well. Faith is the power of our ability to perceive the reality of God's kingdom of good and divine ideas, despite evidence to the contrary, and then to use this to mold and shape substance. Faith is the power of our ability to perceive the reality of God's kingdom of good and divine ideas, despite evidence to the contrary, and then to use this to mold and shape substance. Wow. So not everything has to look good right on the surface. You know, just like our morning look at the headlines and say, oh, evidence to the contrary. Well, God is in there. But latching onto that faith and saying, yeah, God is in there somewhere, and it will work out. You know, one of the unity principles that Barbara had met is our third unity principle that reminds us that our thoughts are creative. Human beings create their experience by the activity of their thinking. Everything in the manifest world has a beginning in thought. Everything in this world has a beginning in thought. I mean, this computer that we're looking at, this keyboard that I'm working at, this microphone, my smartphone, all had a beginning in somebody's thought and then brought it to fruition. Thoughts are creative. And sometimes, you know, I'll be speaking, I think stuff and I say it out loud, and Margie will say, honey, do you really want that to happen? Because I may have been kidding around. And so watch our thoughts, watch our voice. You know, this 12 power concept that our co-founder Charles Thromer founded, Charles was one of the first to assign apostles to each of these 12 powers. Now, some of the other New Thought writers in the early 1900s have talked about these mental faculties, these things that were in our makeup. And Charles put together these 12 powers, and they make up the Christ of our being. And for the power of faith, he assigned each one of these disciples. And for the power of faith, he assigned the apostle Peter. And if you look at our 12 powers book, the very first power that he addresses is the power of faith. And he identified it as part of our body somewhere. And Charles wrote this in the 1920s. And Charles identified the pineal gland as the center of our faith. Now, our pineal gland is this little acorn-shaped gland in the center of our brain, right between the two hemispheres. And it's pine cone-shaped. And when Charles was picking this out in the 1920s, science really had no idea what this pineal gland did. But they knew it existed. And it turns out that it regulates our wake and sleep pattern. It releases melatonin. So isn't it interesting? Our faith regulates our awake or sleep pattern. So being awake to the world. Also, being in, Peter representing faith. And he was kind of an interesting choice for that too. Because remember, before Jesus was taken into custody by the high priests and the Roman soldiers, he asked Peter about standing up. And Peter said, he would never leave him, Lord. And Jesus says, before the rooster crows twice, you shall deny me 3 times. So after he was taken in custody, Peter followed on along. He was hanging around the area of the high priest, and he's warming himself by the fire. And a servant girl says, hey, you're a Galilean. You're one of them too. He says, oh, no, not me. I don't even know the man. And later on, somebody else comes out and says, hey, are you sure you don't know? I think I saw you with his group. No. Just about that time, the rooster crows and Peter begins crying and runs away, knowing that Jesus had told him the truth. He was going to deny. But things change around for Peter. When they're on the Sea of Galilee, they're out rowing away, and Jesus had stayed behind on the shore. And then he decides to meet him at the mid-watch of the night. He's walking on the water. And the apostles are all frightened, saying, oh my God, it's a ghost. And Peter calls out, Lord, if it's you, call me to come to you. And he says, come on, Peter. So Peter, now remember, Peter's a fisherman. He knows about boats and he knows about water. He knows about what happens when you step into the water. But he gets out there and he walks to Jesus and he's doing good. But then the old thinking comes back. He realizes he's on the water and he starts to sink. And Jesus grabs hold of him and says, oh, ye of little faith. Oh, ye of little faith. And he puts him back in the boat with himself. So, and when after the resurrection, there were people showing up in Jerusalem. And Peter, remember, he's a Galilean, he's a fisherman, gets up and gives this beautiful sermon. And according to scripture, 3,000 people were added to the ranks of the then believing Christians, which were called the way then, not Christians. So Peter was kind of an example of faith. We may have firmness in our belief about faith and all of a sudden we have evidence to the contrary. But then we're able to move forward and step out in faith, step out in that water. And that Christ within us catches us and lifts us up. And then we may be called upon and make a brilliant profession of our faith. And people go, hey, that's pretty good. Thanks. I can do that too. Charles Fillmore, in one of his talks, and for about 14 years, I read the unpublished talks of our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, on the Unity Online Radio. And one of the talks that Charles gave in Thanksgiving week of 1932, Charles had said this. He said, God doesn't give us a thing. I mean by thing, he doesn't give us anything that is formed, but he gives us the idea to make all things. And he also gives an example from the Lord's Prayer. God doesn't give you any bread at all, but he gives you some ideas that if you will work with them, will produce bread. So I remember one time I was praying for something and my friend says, Bob, God is not a cosmic bellhop. He's going to give you stuff to do these things. So that's what Charles was talking about sometime in the 1930s. God gives these ideas that if we put them in effect, they will produce what we need. James Dillett Freeman, in his book, The Story of Unity. Now, James Dillett Freeman was brought into the Unity fold by Charles and Murder. I think he was a Seventh-day Adventist at one time, too. And James Dillett Freeman became our poet laureate. He used to have his poems in the Daily Word. And as an interesting aside, when Margie was going through ministerial school, she lived in the home that was formerly owned by James Dillett Freeman. And down in the basement of the main home was the prayer for protection. Now, the first year, Margie lived in this cottage, which was outside of the main house. But then some of her roommates moved away and she moved into the main house. And when Margie moved in there, she was up on the top floor. James Dillett Freeman had this room that he called his non-electric space. He didn't want to have any computers or stuff up there. So Margie gets up there and she starts to work on her computer. Her computer starts working, stops working. The printer stops printing. And and she finds out about this and she says, I got to have a talk with James. So she sat down and she says, look, James, I'm in ministerial school. I need to be able to do this stuff. Whatever it is, I need a reprieve from this. Her thing stopped working. And I remember one time I went to visit her. We're up in the master bedroom up there on the second floor sleeping. All of a sudden the door opens up. I'm going, who's that, honey? And Margie goes, oh, that's James. I said, what do you mean? She says, oh, yeah, doors open and close, lights come on and turn off. So was James Dillard Freeman's spirit there? Whatever, but kind of to me he was. So, but anyway, in his book, The Story of Unity, he pointed out about the Fillmores. And a very part, I think the entrance to this section about the Fillmores and unity, he said this: through faith, they turned to God in the beginning. Through faith, they healed their bodies. Through faith, they brought healing to others. Through faith, they founded unity. And through faith, when things seemed destined to fail, they persevered. And through faith, they built a work that rings around the world with faith and prayer. So James Dillard Freeman was emphasizing the faith of the Fillmores that brought about this wonderful movement that we call unity, the reason why we're all here today. In that same book, he's got a story about in the early days, money was tight. And they had a board meeting, and they were wondering about how they're going to meet expenses. And one of the board members says, well, I sure hope our money holds out. And Myrtle chimed in and says, no, I sure hope our faith holds out. So again, she was pointing to that faith rather than the dollar. And for years, Unity did not have a budget. They believed if Spirit wanted to do something, Spirit would provide. One of the stories that speaks to my heart about faith is a Christmas story. It's just a few weeks ago that I put away our nativity set. And the nativity set is one of my things to do at Christmas. On the day after Thanksgiving, we go out to the garage, bring our stuff in, and I set up our nativity set in our dining room. And I remember my grandfather, he had built this nativity set. And day after Thanksgiving in Chicago, we'd go down, bring up my train set and nativity set and this dollhouse. And then I would help set up this nativity set in our living room. So, and part of that nativity set is got all the fixings, and I've added to it too. It has the shepherds and the wise men and these little animals, and I've added other animals to it too, just to know that they're all present. And three of the elements of this Christmas story as we know it, remember the Christmas story is a mashup of two of the Bible stories from Matthew and Luke, talking about the shepherds and the wise men. Well, one of the elements that first came to mind is the wise men and the star. Now, the wise men were called the Magi, which is a Persian word meaning sages. They were astrologers and wise men, and they studied the heavens, and they knew that something was happening over there in the west, and that they were going to go check it out. So they believed that, and they didn't know exactly where to go. They knew that if they headed west, they would probably run into it, and they had to stop and ask a local cop for direction. They had to go to Herod and say, hey, where's this King of the Jews thing? So Herod called his sages together, and they said, oh, it's in Bethlehem. And the story goes that they were warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, but to go on. And, we think that in the story, there's like three wise men. And we're not really sure how many wise men there were. We know that there were three gifts. So maybe there was at least three wise men, but there could have been as many as 12 or 20. Because back then, travel was hazardous. And here these guys are traveling across unknown country. They're traveling with riches. So they probably had a pretty good retinue of people that were maybe their bodyguards, and maybe more of these wise men that are kind of putting it all together. And to me, that wise men part of me that looks at my belief system. When I was finishing up ministerial school in the last year, we had to take a class called Credo, which is a Latin word meaning I believe. And we had to sit down and look at what do we really believe? Because we had been going through ministerial school for about 3 years. So we're some of us are coming from different backgrounds. I had a Catholic background, a fundamentalist background, and I had unity stuff, and I mission together and say, what do I really believe? Have I sorted through this? I remember one of my instructors says we have our embedded theology. Those are the things that we believe as we're growing up because a minister, a teacher, or whatever, our parents told us this is how it works and with God. And then we have our deliberative theology where we sit down and deliberate and say, yeah, this is what I believe. So we had to kind of sort through that and talk to the instructors and write things about, yeah, this is what I believe. So how we do it. And the other thing that these ministers were warned in a dream, looking at dreams. One of my counselor buddies said, if you have a dream, reflect on what you were feeling when you had that dream. Were you fearful? Were you joyful? Were you excited? Were you anxious? And look at those things that are in your dream that are peculiar to you, because each one of those things are peculiar to you. I mean, if I dreamt of an oil tanker and you dreamt of an oil tanker, it may have two entirely different things. Because for years I was cleaning up oil spills from an oil tanker. You may have just related to the gas that comes into your car. So look at the individual thing. What am I feeling? And what are these events? And take it into prayer and let Spirit unfold what your dream meant. Interestingly, in the 1930s, Unity had a dream interpretation event or department at the village. You could write in your dream and send it to them, and they would write back and tell you what the dream meant. But again, that's what somebody sitting in Missouri thinks it may mean, but you're sitting here in California. What does it mean to you? So if you're looking at your beliefs and stuff, take a take a good hard look at what we're feeling and what do those things mean. Excuse me. I've had a cold for the last week, so if I see me sniffling and coughing, I apologize. But the body temple is somehow speaking to me. The second part of this Christmas story that speaks to me about faith is Jesus and Mary making this journey. Now, most of the artistic representations of this show Mary riding on a donkey. Now, that's not anywhere in Scripture that Mary rode on a donkey. But people believe in, she's with child, she's expecting a baby. Could she really walk this 90 miles from Galilee, Nazareth and Galilee down to Bethlehem and Judea? And normally that's about a 90-mile trip. Now, the Jews at that time, if you lived up in Galilee and you wanted to get down to Judea, right in between was Samaria. Jews and Samaritans did not get along. That's why we have that story about the Good Samaritan. So from Bethlehem, they would go over to the Jordan Valley, go down along the side of Samaria, and then back over to Jerusalem, and then down to Bethlehem. So it was about 90 miles, and probably took them a week or more, because they're only traveling about 2 miles a day, maybe less with Mary being on a donkey and Joseph having a leader. And they too had to go in groups. Some years ago, when Margie and I lived in Modesto and we were licensed teachers at Modesto, Unity in Modesto. During the holidays, there was a church in Ceres that had a trip to Bethlehem event. They would rent out a farmer's field next to the church, and the church members would portray these first century Jews. And you would go there, they would put you in a little group, and they'd say, okay, you're traveling with the family of Zechariah. And remember to stay together. And if the Romans stop us, listen to the Roman soldiers because they're in charge here. So we're marching on along, and it was cold at night. And as we get to this one place, the Roman soldiers are over on the side, and they all come out and they go, Jews, get over here, stand in line. So we have to stand in line. And this Roman soldier on a big white horse comes riding on up. And he's dressed as a Roman centurion, and he falls off that horse, and he's going on along, and he goes, Jews. He says, you, Jew in the ball cap, step forward. What's your name? Me, I have a ball cap on. Oh, my God. So I stepped forward. He's right in my face. He's going, Jew, what's your name? I said, Bob. Now, I've been in 3 military boot camps. I have had drill instructors in my face. And I think, oh my God, if I was a first century Jew, here's this Roman soldier with sword on his hand, really threatening. I mean, I could end up dead in a ditch if, with these guys having the power to do that. Say, wow, those first century Jews had it tough. So, then we gone through and all these different things, but that trip was a reminder of that. So Joseph and Mary both had to have faith that they could make the journey. Joseph had to believe that he could make it down to Bethlehem. And Mary, too, had to have faith that even though she was great with child, she could make the journey, too. And metaphysically looking at this, sometimes outside forces can force us to do stuff. Like the Roman census that made Joseph go down to his hometown. And I was thinking about that hometown. As we're going along in our faith, sometimes we have to go back to our hometown beliefs. And what do? Oh my God. So we can fall back into that embedded theology, or we can look and say, what's our deliberative theology in unity, and reweigh those things. What do I really believe now? And I think when we get down there, we know that there's always going to be room for us in the end. As we get to our final destination, taking it into prayer, we can do this. And then finally, the third aspect of this Christmas story, as it will, the shepherds and the angels. Now, Luke talked about the shepherds. Matthew talked about the wise men. And these shepherds, they were the first ones there. They didn't have to study or do anything. The angels showed up. They said a great heavenly host showed up to these angels. And of course, they were fearful. Oh my God, what do we think do? And they tell them about this event that's going to happen. So they hurried on over. And remember, shepherds were lowly, humble people. They took care of the sheep. And what do sheep represent? Those innocent thoughts that we kind of take care of in our mind. So, and the thing is that, that's stuck into my mind is they got there first. They didn't have to travel very far. They're out in the fields close by. And the angel showed up. So sometimes angels show up in our lives too. I think God speaks through people. And I remember one time, one of my minister buddies, Lenny Bow, we went to the same church together in Modesto. He was in ministerial school ahead of me, and he was in charge of the ministry in San Jose. And we were bike riding along the trail of American River, and we kind of got lost. We weren't sure where we were and how do I get back to where I had parked my truck so we could put the bikes back in there. And so we're driving on along, and there's this woman walking down the path, and we go, hey, can you tell us where this little parking area is for this thing? She says, oh yeah, go down this path here, turn right across the street, and you're over there. And I remember Lenny saying, there's our angel. Let us away from the river into where our truck was. So, well, today we looked at this power of faith, which Charles Fillmore talked about in the 12 Powers of Man. And also hope, which is about the expectation of good. So if we're hoping and we're expecting and we're praying and we're believing, hang on to that belief. Don't jump back into that hope and go back at the time. And our third unity principle is that human beings create their experience by the power of their thinking. Remember our thinking. And as we move through this year of 225 and some unsettling events show up, regardless of appearances, like the morning paper, know that the Spirit of God is there. And just like the Irish, fear knocked on the door. Faith answered, there is no one there. So, dear ones, let's move into a period of meditative reflection. And I invite you to sit comfortably on your chair. And if you're watching at home on Facebook or YouTube, sit comfortably on your couch or your chair or wherever you are in your house with your computer. Close your eyes if you desire, or just let your eyes be softly forward and gaze at the computer screen, focusing on nothing but seeing everything. Become aware of the pressure of our feet on the floor, our body pressing against the chair or whatever we're sitting upon. the temperature of our air on our skin, and bring our awareness to our chest. Feel the gentle rise and fall of our chest as we breathe in and we breathe out. This wonderful process called respiration, where we inspire air and exhale those waste products. A process that goes on whether we're aware of it or not. And we cannot physically stop us, because if we pass out, our body will kick in and keep on going and breathing. So it takes care of us. Just like we know that spirit takes care of us. And feel the pressure of our body on that chair and know that we are supported by that chair, just like spirit supports us in our lives. Bring our awareness to our heart center, that wonderful physical organ that sends blood to every cell of our being. It takes away the waste products and we may release them, that they may be reused by other life processes, perhaps by any plants that we have in our homes or the trees in our yards outside. And if there's any part of our body temple that needs that healing hand of spirit, I invite you to see it very clearly in your mind's eye. And see that person, that place, that thing, that event, bathed in a blue, white light bubble of healing energy, bringing about the right and perfect healing at the right and perfect time and in the right and perfect way. And if there's any person, place, thing, or event that needs that healing hand of spirit in our lives, I invite you to see it very clearly in your mind's eye. And see that person, that place, that thing, that event, bathed in a blue-white light bubble of beautiful healing energy, bringing about the right and perfect solution at the right and perfect time and in the right and perfect way. And Jesus of Nazareth, when asked by his disciples, saying, Lord, teach us how to pray, he told them to go within to the closet of their being, their heart center, to shut the door to the outside world. And the Father, which hears in secret, speaks in a small, still voice, but rewards openly. So we've gone to the closet of our being, our heart center. We mentally shut the door to the outside world. And we take a few moments resting in the silence, listening for that small, still voice, or images flashing through the screen of our mind, or images flashing through the screen of our mind, or thoughts flitting through our mind as we gently rest in the silence. And now we bring our awareness back to our body temple. Feel the pressure of our feet on the floor, the pressure of our body against our chair or whatever we're sitting upon. And perhaps in that time of silence, we heard something like a small, still voice, or images flash through the screen of our mind, or thoughts through our mind, or perhaps not. But we have made ourselves open and available to spirit. And perhaps later today, a phone call from a friend, an email from a friend, a book we're reading, a movie we're watching, a billboard we're driving by will catch our eye, and spirit will say, hey, this is my message to you today as we move forward in this 2025 world. And now we gently open our eyes to become fully present, ready for some more wonderful music by Bill.
Bill. Bill is going to wait until the end of the service to sing his closing song.
Oh, okay.
Barbara is going to give some, well, first, of course, thank you so much, Bob. Reverend Bob did it again. Lots for me to process, and we can have some discussion during our chat time. In the meantime, I needed to make some announcements, and I realize now I don't have in front of me the titles of our March talks, but I do know on that newsletter that you're going to receive in a couple days, you will have all this information. You will be reminded that church is open on the first and third Sunday of that month, but it's also our community Sunday at the end of the month with Sarah Merlin. And it will also remind you about that daylight savings time is coming on that second Sunday. And so you, anyway, have to set your clock. What is it? Ahead? I forgot. Anyway, and on that Sunday, we have on our Zoom, Angelica will be with us. And you know, she's the gal that has the meditations and the chants and the music. She does the whole show, and it is fabulous. And then we have Bob Brach, Reverend Bob, and we'll be back at the end of the month. And you'll read about his talk and the fact that it'll be on Lent, which is perfect with Easter coming. And Bill will be the musician. So your newsletter coming in just a few days. And so I think I will. Okay, let's just go ahead. Donations are greatly appreciated, of course. Mail to Unity, P.O. Box 755, Lower Lake 95457. P.O. Box 755, Lower Lake 95757. And okay, we shall go ahead now with Bill's closing song, and then we'll unmute for the chat at the very end. So, okay, Bill.
Okay, well, Bob, this is a song about faith. It seems to have coordinated with your talk pretty well. So, written by a friend of mine, Dutch Hannig, and it's called I Will See You Again. We have both been in love. This wasn't our first time. We both had stood up for better or worse. You had your family, I had mine. We didn't know we were in love for the last time. We've been through so much, life's troubles before, in love through good times and bad. You've gone, but I'm not sad. You're the only love I've had. I will see you again. We know where, we just don't know when. A place where our love never ends. I will see you again. I will see you again. One of us had to go first. Being second is always the worst. We both knew after one was gone, who lived would have to be strong. It's always the living that must carry on. I will see you again. We know where, we just don't know when. A place where our love never ends. I will see you again. I will see you again. We know where, we just don't know when. A place where our love never ends. I will see you again. I will see you again. I will see you again.